right, good afternoon. We'll go ahead and get started. I am recording this, so for anyone who cannot make it or wants to watch it back, we have the ability to do that. So today we're going to be talking about giving effective feedback in Brightspace. So now that we are past kind of like the creation of all things in Brightspace, I think what we've learned is that we're moving into like phase 2 of training. When we talk about like, now how do I actually deliver out my courses? How do students interact with it? How do I grade things? How do I give feedback, etc.? So that's kind of the Spark series. At least that's our hope, that we can kind of touch on those kind of topics that help you now move into the delivery of content to students. So today we'll focus on the feedback. So what I hope to cover with you today, which I think we'll get through all of it. We have 2 hours, so we have plenty of time to kind of do that, with plenty of time for Q&A. But I want to talk about strategies for clear and actionable feedback. This is important just so we understand not only how to give our students feedback, how our students will view that feedback, but also just the importance of what we supply students with that feedback. So we'll go over some best practices for those sorts of things. We are going to explore the Brightspace feedback tools. So I'm going to dive in and show you a tutorial for assignments. We'll look at quizzes and we'll look at discussions. So we can kind of just, all of your abilities to give feedback. And then the very last objective today is I want to make sure that you clearly understand how your students will obtain your feedback once you supply it. So we're gonna do some demos. I have some stuff set up for the demo learner that we'll go through, just so you clearly understand that, like, once you supply it, how our students gonna actually be able to see it. So first, before we actually get into some content, I have a couple polls. This is more just so I understand the essence of like where everybody is at with feedback. So let me launch our first one. Okay, so this, if you'll just go ahead and answer. So it's, how do you currently give most of your feedback to students? And this really does not determine on modality. So written comments, whether that's in Brightspace or on paper, do you use rubrics, inline annotations on student submissions? That would be very much driven to Brightspace, audio or video feedback, or then all the other things, the emails, the meetings, office hours, etc. And select all that apply. Just waiting a couple. We'll go ahead and end it. Results. So it looks like majority of us, at least in some capacity, offer some written comments to our students. At least half of us use rubrics in some capacity. Again, about half of us use the annotations, which that could go hand in hand with the written comments. So if you do have virtual assignments, you might have selected written comments and the inline annotations, which is fine. A few do audio and video feedback, and then quite a bit use some of their emails, meetings, and office hour time to do that. Okay, thank you for participating in that. Okay, so before we get into the demo of things, let's just talk about like what classifies some good best practices when we're talking about giving feedback to students. And this is probably not new, but it's always good to have just a little refresher. Um, Grades are great for students, for the numerical grades, because it does allow them to evaluate their progress at this point in time. and it gives them that. But feedback is really important for students, as we all kind of know, but it's really important for students because the feedback that you supply along with grades allows students to adjust their learning and then improve how they come about to interact with your content. So having kind of the best practices around the feedback you supply students allow them to grow as a learner, not just decide, oh, I got an 80 on that test, so I know I'm getting a B at this moment, but it allows them to understand maybe things that they didn't do well to prepare for that assessment. And so they can make those adjustments and improve their learning as they go into your next assessment so they don't get an 80, maybe they can get something higher. So making sure that we have some of the best practices allow students to do that. So the first, we're going to kind of put these into four. So the first one is timely. So it's important for us to make sure that we're supplying students feedback in a timely manner when the content is fresh in their head. If it's scaffolding assignments, so it's things that you're asking students to do to prepare for either a chapter test, a midterm, etc., that you're making sure that you kind of give that feedback to students in enough time for them to do what we just talked about and adjust how they learn and interact with your content in a way that would allow them to better themselves for whatever that next assessment is. Um, and sometimes when I talk with instructors, we talk a lot about pacing of their courses. So when we talk about timely feedback, sometimes things are so scrunched together that you're like, well, this assignment is due on Wednesday and they have a test on Sunday. So that makes it really hard for me to give timely feedback because we're all busy. You teach multiple classes, you're involved in lots of other things. So we talk a lot about pacing and thinking about what is the pacing of your course? How many assessments do you have? Could you kind of work through that pacing to allow yourself additional time to give timely feedback so you know that that is coming in a manner that students can actually use that feedback and it's meaningful for whatever the next task may be. The second one is looking at specific feedback. So making sure that you're focusing on concrete aspects of the work rather than general praises or criticism. So general praises are always good. Great work, good effort, those sorts of things. Those are always good to kind of put within it, but making sure that you're specifically drawing their attention to what was good about the assignment, and making a couple points of that. Like these were really strong. Here's things to work on, etc. Um, Again, that goes back just so they can use your feedback to improve themselves as they move through it. The next one is balance. It's always important for us to incorporate feedback that has good and bad. Even if a student received a 92 on a paper, there probably is some things that they could do. Unless a student aces everything, there's always room for improvement. So making sure that even to your best of students, you are pushing them to consider something that would strengthen their learning or improve themselves for whatever, again, that next task may be. And the last one is actionable. It's important that when we give students feedback that there's clear steps in what we're doing. So if you say to a student that they could improve something, do you have resources in your course already that you supply your students that helps them do that better? So maybe an actionable step would be you could improve on X and then make sure you reference a certain resource that you supply them. So you're kind of pushing them back to the resources that you supply so they can actually have some actionable steps to improve whatever you're asking them to improve on. And again, just feedback should guide the learning of students, not just point out errors. So it is important. And sometimes I'm a math person. So sometimes I get in this kind of groove too. It's like there's black and white in math, and sometimes it's hard to find that gray. But it's important for us to not only just identify the errors of what students do in their writing and their math, etc., but also just making sure that we're kind of improving that learning and guiding them through how to kind of make some steps to kind of improve on those errors moving forward. Okay. So with that said, I want to do just a little, another little poll, just a little reflection exercise. Don't feel like you have to give me a paragraph here. But what I want you to think about is what was the best feedback that you got as a student and why did you find it helpful? Um, so again, what's one strategy oh no, hold on. Don't answer that. Don't answer that. Go back. Not it. Here we go. This is it. All right, answer this one for me. Think of the best feedback you ever got as a student. What made it helpful? Again, just a couple points. About 30 more seconds. Again, just a couple points. Doesn't have to be in complete sentences. This might not be very productive here, people. I've never really used an open-ended. You're all learning with me, I guess. Trying to find your responses here. Okay, well, that was a fail. I'll come back to that. I was hoping it gave me something a whole lot more meaningful. I'll get it. I'll get some responses. Anybody want to share something that they thought for that question that you either thought and now use in your class or anything like that? Okay. Okay. Well, I'll pull up the results and I'll share them at the end. Okay. So now let's just go ahead and jump into the demo. So I am going to just kind of walk you through some of the features of Brightspace. So we're first going to start just from scratch. I have an assignment in here. The demo learner submitted it. So we're just going to go in from scratch and we're just going to evaluate this together and leave the feedback so we can make sure that we all understand kind of what those feedback opportunities are. So I'm in my sandbox. I'm just going to go to quick eval to jump into that assignment. Okay, so we're going to just grade this one new submission here. Okay, so the submission, I have obviously the submission from the student. I do have a rubric, so we'll go through evaluating that on the rubric, got the grades, etc. Okay, so I'm going to pull up the student submission here. Okay, so this is just a PDF that the student supplied. If it was a Word image, it would work the exact same thing here. But your feedback options when you have assignments that students are submitting, either a text submission or a file submission, either one is fine. You're going to be able to kind of put some feedback within that document. So just walking through the settings of the feedback, The admin wheel in here is your page layout. So this is where if a student submits a page and it was like, you know, landscape versus vertical, you'd be able to adjust that. You can also adjust whether you see one page or two pages as you kind of work through that. You can always, you know, zoom in, zoom out. So the feedback options on the right here, this here, the little pencil, this is where you can have your annotations. And when you're having your annotations, you have all the abilities. You can draw, you can highlight text. If you add something that you don't like, you can erase it. You can have free-form highlight. So obviously text highlight is going to just be for documents, but maybe there's something that just makes sense for you to free-form highlight. These are your options here. No matter which one you pick, you can adjust the color, you can adjust the size. So you have some options here to kind of customize that. I have noticed that when you customize these options, your customized options stick. So if you kind of customize it one way, if you go back in later and either grade this assignment or another assignment, you'll notice that those customizations are there. At least that's what I've noticed when I use it for my math class, that I don't have to necessarily change those customizations every time I go in, which is nice. But again, if you pick just any drawing, obviously this works best if you have some sort of a writing tablet of some sort, but you'd be able to just write right on there. Okay. The other option that you have is you have the ability to add these text boxes. And these are obviously nice, especially for you know, identifying either grammatical errors or things like that for writing papers or just content, things like that. So you do have the ability to pick from lots of different icons to start the boxes. So you can just have your standard comment box here, or you can also choose one of the other ones here. So I'll just pick one, and then it's going to come back here. You do have the ability to change the color if you want to change the color of that. So I'm going to go ahead and make it red. And then from there, you can come down and you can add that wherever you want to. So you have that. You can add the feedback here, whatever you would like to say. Okay, you can come back up and you can add another one. Okay, and that's kind of how they appear to students. I'll show you it, but it appears just like this, where you can just have the icon, they hover over it, and then whatever that note is kind of pops up to students. You can also add lines, etc. here, and then you can also add some text feedback here. Okay, so these are all what Brightspace refers to as inline annotations. So whether it's hand drawn, and let me go ahead and use that. Okay, so whether it's hand drawn or whether it's kind of these text boxes here, that's kind of what the inlines are. And I will show you what that appears like for students, both in order for them to access that inline annotations, and then what it looks like once they kind of access it there. Any questions on the annotation tools, just right here, the features that are available to you?
I'm sorry, Stephanie. Can you show me how you changed the color again on that real quick?
Yeah. So you just go here, you'll pick your icon first, whatever that icon is. And then you're going to have to go back and it'll be the one next to it.
Got it. Thank you.
And it just gives you the standard 6. You can't customize any more than those 6, but it gives you 6 options there. Okay. Okay, so those are kind of your annotation things. And again, that's in the pencil there. Of course, you can print it, you can download, you can do all those things, but that doesn't really necessarily, well, I guess it could if you decide to download it and handwrite your annotations, that's fine. And I'll show you how you could do that and then just easily attach it to the feedback. So you could give them back that written feedback if you decide to do that by hand. And that would fall over here. So over on the right-hand side where you have your scoring, if you do have a rubric attached to the assignment, the rubric is right here. You click on it and you score it using the rubric. Again, these are rubrics that you would create. So the criterion would be whatever you want them to be on whatever scale you want them. So when you have this rubric criteria, you can have it here, you can score it. It'll automatically add up the points as you kind of go through the rubric. You also have the ability to add feedback for every rubric criterion. So if I wanted to emphasize, so if I scored this student, at the level 3, which is 7 out of 10, if I wanted to add feedback to that, I would just click here and I would be able to add that feedback. And notice that, when you do that, you do have kind of an abbreviated HTML editor here. So you do have the ability to kind of add bullets. You can make things bold, italicized, etc. You do have the ability to kind of insert stuff. So if you did want to link to a certain document or something that maybe covered that specific criterion, you would be able to do it right here in that criterion feedback. Okay, so again, this is all just emphasized to the rubric. So it allows students to see what they got scored on the rubric, and it allows you to kind of give that very specific criterion for that. But you do have the ability to add text, or you could have linked feedback to PDFs, videos, whatever that may be. You can get to that through your insert stuff. Okay, so you could continue doing that. Again, you can add feedback for every criterion that you have. Okay, it'll add it up automatically and it'll publish that into the overall grade. Okay, or put that into the overall grade. It won't publish until we hit publish. Okay. All right, so again, annotated feedback over on the document or Word document or image, whatever. And then you have the rubric feedback. If you have a rubric attached to your assignment or quiz, you can see that on the right. And then you have this overall feedback section. Okay, so there's lots of different ways that you can put feedback in for your students. So the overall feedback, this space right here, whether I'm in assignments or quizzes, discussions, whatever that looks like, whatever I enter into this overall feedback shows in the third column of a student's gradebook. So they would see their assignment, they would see their grade, and then they would see whatever you put in for the overall feedback. So that text would go there. They're not going to see the rubric, the criterion feedback, unless they click on to the rubric criterion, which I'll show you what that looks like for students. Okay. So here, this is going to, okay. So the overall feedback again shows in the third column for students in their grade book. So they can just easily click on grades, see their grade, and see some form of overall feedback. Now, I have found it best, and again, this is just my practice for my math class because I use a lot of the annotation features to give my students feedback on their math work. So what I have found that I just put a very standard, and I have it saved, so I just copy and paste it all the time. But in the overall feedback, I use that space as directions for students of how to get to the feedback. So I just let them know that they need to click on their submissions, and then they need to click on the submission to see the annotated feedback. So I kind of just give them a few bullets of steps so they know how to actually get to the feedback. That's how I use the overall feedback section, but you could use it for specific content feedback depending on how you want to use that. But again, if you use the rubrics and you give feedback on the rubric criterion, then you might just want to use the overall feedback as kind of that directing point for students to know how to get access to the feedback that is most important or most prevalent to the assignment that you're giving them or quiz. This goes for all assignment tools. Okay. The other thing you have the ability to is you can add, you can attach documents here. So if you did end up printing this student's submission and you wanted to write on it, handwrite it. I want to highlight myself. I want to write it up. I want to circle. I want to do all those things, but I want to do it on paper. And then I'm going to load it back in. If that is your practice, this is a great space to just then go back in and attach that feedback to the students as a document. And then they will also see this attachment in the third column of their grades. So they would be able to see their grade, and then right next to it, they would see the attachment of what you supplied there. Same thing applies if you give them audio feedback or if you give them recorded video feedback. Okay, it would also show up as a link on that third column of their grades. And again, at the end, I will show you what I mean by all of that. And then hopefully that just brings it all together in terms of how do students actually get these sorts of things. So I'm just going to really quickly just make a recorded audio just so you can see it in the demo learners grade book. So this is what it looks like when you record audio feedback. It'll pop up like this. You can upload a file if you have a pre-recorded audio file that you just want to use for every student. You could do that too, but if you wanted to customize it, you would just hit new recording and say something like, "Hi, demo learner, I reviewed your assignment. Your introduction is clear and your ideas are well organized. For next time, try adding a couple more examples to support your main points. Overall, nice work, and I look forward to your next draft." Let's stop recording. It'll give you a playback and like, "Hi, demo learner, I reviewed it. I don't need to hear myself." And then you could hit add, and then it's going to add you for a title. So I'm just going to say student feedback. You could give it a description if you would like. Again, these do get saved to your media library. So if you end up recording a recording for a student and you're like, I could use this for other students, you can pull that from your media library too. So making sure that you give it a title in a description that is kind of at least easy to find for you would be good. I'm not going to give it a description for now. You can classify the language if that's appropriate. And then lastly, you always want to make sure that you check the box for automatically generate captions. So Brightspace will do that for you. So that way, if a student gets this audio feedback, they will have the captions there for them. Okay, so I'm just going to hit add. And then it'll pop up right underneath my overall feedback section. It'll show as the attachment here. Okay, so I'm going to leave that as is. Okay, so I have some annotated feedback for students, for this student on the PDF. I have some rubric feedback that I used here. I have a score. I have the overall feedback, and I have some audio feedback. Okay, so once you kind of get done with your all the feedback, whatever feedback that may be for this assignment, I can either save it as a draft and just do that for all my students, and then I can publish them all at one time, or you can publish them as you go. I have found, again, this is just my practice, I have really found that I like giving all of my feedback and all of my scores to my students and just saving them as a draft. And then as soon as I'm done grading all of my students' assignments for that particular activity, I then go in and publish all of them so they get their feedback at the same time versus kind of spaced out depending on my availability to do that. But that's completely your preference. I'm going to go ahead and just publish it for the demo learner so we're able to circle back later and see that feedback when I impersonate them. Okay. Questions so far on any of the feedback options for assignments? Okay. All right. All right, so I'm going to jump back and I want to just show you a quiz and how that kind of looks like. Now we won't walk through this together. I'm just going to jump into a quiz that I already graded and gave feedback to, but I just want you to kind of see the different spaces that you have available to you to leave feedback for quizzes. Um, so I'm going to jump into my quizzes real quick and just pull one up. Let's do this one. Okay, so I'm gonna just jump into this attempt. Okay, so this was a quiz attempt. So when you go to grade it, this is the space that it looks like. I have some feedback already put in here for them. Okay. But so if you do give your students multiple attempts, you will see the multiple attempts up in the drop down. So when you're giving your feedback on quizzes, you have two spaces. You have your attempts and you have your completion summary. Okay, so it's important to understand both and how they both function for students. Okay, so it's going to default to one or the other. And I know that sounds odd because it's a default. I have found that sometimes mine defaults to attempts, and then other times it just defaults to completion summary. But so making sure you understand which page you're on is important. So the feedback gets supplied in a way that you want your students to see it. So if I click on the attempts, okay, I see their quiz attempts. I'll see all their questions. I'll see what they got right, what they got wrong, if it's automatic graded. I'll see the score. You can obviously adjust the score manually if you would want, even if it is auto graded. You have the ability to leave feedback for every single question. So if a student got a parse wrong and you wanted to go in and leave them the feedback, you can do that. You have your shortened HTML editor, so you still have the ability to insert links, resources, etc. You can do all of that per question. And I will show you another quiz that has a rubric, but you can have rubrics for for individual questions too. And if you did, those rubrics would show here, okay? But again, this feedback section here is question feedback. So it's per question and students would see it. Students will only see this feedback if you allow them to see the questions after they submit it. It doesn't have to be right after they submit it. If you say, I don't want them to see it right after they submit it, but you made those custom choices to say, but they can see all the questions on this date, which if you need help doing that, we can set up some time to do that. I won't cover that today in feedback, but in order for students to see the question feedback, they have to have the ability to see the questions. If they don't, your question feedback is not going to be available to students to see. Okay. So again, this is just the question feedback on the left. When you're in the attempt, you also have the attempt feedback. That's on the right. So it's going to show them the grade. It's also going to have a space for the attempt feedback. Okay. This attempt feedback, and I will show you where that shows for students. In order for them to see the attempt feedback, they have to click on their attempt. So if the link for their attempts shows in their grade book, but they have to actually click on that link to see your attempt feedback. If they're not clicking that, they're not going to be able to see that, okay? That goes back to the directions. Like if that's where you want to leave your feedback here, then you need to make sure in the overall feedback, you tell students, click on your attempt to see the feedback for the quiz. That could be a standard direction you give for all the students in the overall. Okay. Yeah, Rena, I will show you what a student looks like for everything at the end of this. So again, I'm in the attempt, I have the attempt feedback and I have question feedback. But then if I go to the completion summary, okay, this will show me any multiple attempts the student has. So if I do allow them to take multiple attempts, I will see all their attempts here. And it'll show you which one is highest, or however you chose to have that score. It'll show you the average time taken between all the attempts, etc. And then here is where you will find the box for overall feedback. anytime you see overall feedback, this is the written text that will be supplied in the third column of their gradebook. So if you want students to be able to click on grades, see their score, and then see some form of written feedback, you have to make sure that that feedback is going in the overall feedback box, no matter if I'm in assignments, quizzes, discussions, etc. Okay, you can be assured that if I do that in the overall feedback, that they're going to see it on their gradebook screen. They're not going to have to click into anything to get to the additional feedback. Okay. All right. And again, for the overall feedback, even in quizzes, you still have the ability to attach. So you could attach just the key in general, like here's the key to the test, and they can just kind of go through and cross-reference themselves. Or you could do video and audio feedback as well. Okay. So a few different spaces for quizzes to add it. Let me jump into another quiz. Because I have another one that has a rubric. So I just want to show you what that looks like. Okay. So I'm going to jump into the demo learner again. Okay, so I'm just going to show you the completion summary because this one I did go in and take twice, so you could see attempt 1, attempt 2, the different scores, etc. Overall feedback is here. Okay, and then if I go to the retaken attempt 2, I think I have a rubric here. If not, it's amazing. Sorry. One more time, let me jump for you. That's what I get for giving you lots of options to look at. So I just want to show you what it looks like. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so for this one, question 2, I have a rubric attached to it. So if that is the case, if I'm scoring this based on a rubric, I would just click on the rubric and then I would click through and score it however you want to score it. The rubric works the exact same as the rubric for the assignment. So if I kind of work through scoring here, you can add criterion feedback for each criterion of the rubric for the question. You can do that and students will see it as they kind of review the questions. Again, when I leave question feedback, even if the questions have a rubric attached to it, at some point you have to allow your students to see the questions. It can be all questions or it can just be the incorrect ones. It is your choice. But in order for them to actually see feedback for at least at a minimum incorrect ones, you have to make sure that you allow them to see the incorrect questions at some point after submission in order for them to obtain this feedback. Okay. All right, questions on the quiz feedback. Yvonne, your question, so is the feedback, are you able to use it for publisher materials? And the answer to that would be no.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, it's just going to sync over the grade from whatever that quiz is within the publisher, and then that's what's going to come through on Brightspace, unfortunately.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep. All right, let me jump in to the demo learner and let's talk through. So I'm going to impersonate the demo learner. So I kind of have given the demo learner feedback on assignments, quizzes, discussions, etc. So I'm just going to kind of show you what that looks like. So this is from a student view, and I'm going to click into my grade book. Now, if you have assignments or quizzes or discussion boards that are available to students for the life of the semester, they could technically obtain this exact same feedback by going into the content space and clicking back on the assignment. Okay, so they can get to the feedback by going that way. But if you have your quizzes have end dates, so it's like the quiz is due and it's gone and it's not in the content space for the students any longer, then they're going to have to go the way that I'm about to show in order for them to get the feedback and see past quizzes or past assignments. Okay, so I'm going to click on the demo learners gradebook. And this is what it's going to show. Okay. So I have all of my grade items. I have the points earned. It is weighted, so it'll show the weighted achievement and it'll show the grade. And then what I mean by that last column, the comments and assessments, this is where the overall feedback shows for students. Okay. So if I keep scrolling, you can see here's a discussion board. This introduce yourself as a discussion board. I have a student's grade for it. And then it shows the overall feedback. Okay, so my overall feedback that I supplied here was just C rubric. And so then they would have to know they have to click on this graded rubric in order to see any criterion feedback that I may have given them. Okay, so again, this was the criterion feedback for this last one because they did not respond to their peers. So that is why they got 0 points for that one criterion. Okay, so in this instance, for the discussion board, I just used that overall feedback section as a clear way to show my students, this is how you get to your feedback. If you want to know why you got 50% on this, see the rubric. And then they click on the rubric right below it. Okay, now, if I didn't say see rubric, this would still appear. But sometimes students need to have like the very clear direction of like, click on it. So giving them some sort of direction allows them to understand, okay, I want to click on this versus just ignoring it and not clicking through. If you're using, especially if you're using a rubric and you're giving them that criterion feedback, you want to make sure that they're leveraging that feedback that you're supplying them. So trying to be clear and transparent to students would be important. Okay. If I keep scrolling, again, this is another discussion board. This overall feedback is just text feedback. Okay, so there is no rubric attached to it. They cannot go back into the discussion board. So this is just kind of the feedback, the text feedback that I gave them. So that's kind of what that would appear to be like. Now, if I scroll down to quizzes, okay, so you have your quizzes, you have your scores, etc. So the view quiz attempts, this is going to link for students. Okay, so that's what this looks like here. So again, for this course navigation quiz, I just wanted to clearly show that the overall feedback, again, when you leave it in there, this is where it appears for students. So it appears in their grade book, so they clearly understand either the feedback or the directions to find the feedback that is needed for this quiz or assessment, wherever you kind of put that, okay? They can click onto their view quiz attempts. That will push them back into the quiz. They will see both of the attempts here. They could click on one or the other. It doesn't matter. They could click on both. Click into one. Again, this is from a student. So if I'm looking at it, remember we talked about that attempt feedback. That is when you're in the attempt and you have the box on the right. This is where that attempt feedback appears for students. It appears for them before they view the questions. So that's where that would appear if you leave space there. If you do allow students to see all the questions, they do have the ability to kind of filter a little bit too, which is kind of nice for students to be able to do that. But again, if you, again, show students your questions, if I didn't show students my questions, they would just see this top bar here. This is it. They would not be able to scroll. There would be no questions if I said they can't view any questions. But again, if I want to leave question feedback, then I want to make sure that I give them the ability to see the questions at some point. So then they can leverage, okay, this was the question, this is what I got wrong, here's the feedback below it that my instructor gave me on that particular one. Okay. Okay, and then go out of that. Okay, so again, you can see these other quizzes here. They all have quiz attempts for them. I did not leave overall feedback for any of the other ones except for those. So students would have to come in here and they would have to like just think about it or have the initiative to click on the quiz attempts to go back in to see the quiz, which for quizzes, most likely students would do that. But if I jump back into this one, I just want to show you, because this is one that had a rubric. So again, attempt feedback would be at the top of this. And then for each question, there would be the feedback there. Okay, so question 2 was the one that had the rubric. So you can see that students would see the rubric and they would see the scores that I gave them. Okay, and if I left criterion feedback, those would also be here as well. I just didn't for this example. Okay. All right, if I move past quizzes, okay, I get into assignments. Okay, so again, same structure as the quizzes are. You're looking at that right hand for them to be able to see it. So I just want to show you kind of what those all look like here. So again, this is some overall feedback that I gave. You can add emojis to your feedback. You can add dividers if you want to kind of break up the feedback there too. We talked about adding attachments. If you did add an attachment, like a key of some sort, to an assignment feedback, you can see that those attached files show below. So that's going to show any attached PDFs. It's also going to show, which we'll get to the bottom, it'll show some audio feedback. But then if I leave annotations, it's going to appear like this. It's going to say view inline feedback. Okay, so if I click on that as a student, that's where it's going to take me to that first that we talked about that kind of had, I added some notes here, I highlighted some things, I could write on it, etc. So this is what it would look like to students if you use those annotation features. That's how it would appear in their gradebook. It would have a link to those. And then that is how it would appear when I showed it to you. Okay. Moving down just a little bit, you can see some other things. Again, the overall feedback shows as it has been here. This was the audio recording that I made for students. So they can have student feedback, knowing that it's audio, click on it and listen to it. Again, a link to the inline feedback, those annotations that I made. And then if it has a rubric, it's going to show the graded rubric for students. So this here, if I clicked on that, then that's where I would see all of the criterion. And if I left criterion feedback, that's where students would see it within the rubric. Okay. Okay, so again, this, I wanted to show you a few different options. You might not do all of these options. So you may not do inline feedback and do audio feedback and use a rubric. I just wanted to make sure that I showed you kind of how they all appear, just no matter which one of the options you picked. But again, it's important that leveraging the countless ways, and there is a lot of ways that you can leave feedback for students. So finding the best way that works for your particular assessment or your class in general, maybe it's the same way for every assignment. Sometimes maybe that varies depending on the assignment type. But no matter which way works best for you, it's important that students understand how to get to it. Why are you leaving it? There's no sense in doing the work to give them, specific actionable feedback that you're like, this could really help you improve your learning, and they don't know how to get to it. So making sure that they understand where you're going to house the feedback is one of those really good practices. The first 3-4 weeks of the semester is students are submitting new assignments. that you also take the time to just talk with them about how to access the feedback. Okay. Questions on the student view of feedback?
Yeah, I've got a quick question on that quiz that you had open that displayed an error saying something like the correct answer. I think it was the Cincinnati State quiz.
Yeah.
You take a look at that. See in blue, oh, back up. Correct answer is not displayed for written responses type questions. Is there a way you can get rid of that?
Yeah, no, there's not. Um, and so this here, so you do have the ability when you have written response type questions, you do have the ability to enter like an answer key for those types of questions. And that's really just for, obviously the evaluator that's kind of assessing the quiz. But this is just letting it know that like that answer key is not going to show for students. So there is no like correct answer given to them unless you supply it. So you could very well supply, a link to an answer key for this type of question. You could maybe supply a sample answer for students to be able to understand like what that would look like to get full credit type of an answer. But for the written response, this is just a note for students to know that like the correct answer. And if it's also important too, because if I was a student and I took the quiz and I went right into my quiz attempts and you allowed me to see all the questions, or I could see all the questions with the incorrect answers, it's important. This is a good message because students would know like, okay, this one, there is no like answer displayed because it's a written response type. But the other ones, obviously, you're going to give them that correct answer. But this is kind of this is a default that Brightspace just puts for the written response question types.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm.
I have a question to you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
I've noticed that if I go into like the quick eval area and then look at like all submissions, that you can see it will give a note that says from the student feedback if it has been read. And so I'm wondering if you know exactly what a student has to do for that setting to change. So yeah, if you click there, yeah, on the submission list, and then on the right-hand, yes, so where it says go to evaluation and published, if a student has, I've seen on mine where it was for some students, it will say evaluation read. But there's other students who I think are getting the feedback who it doesn't say that for, like, because I was sending people emails like, I see you haven't read my comments yet. But so I'm just wondering if you know what it is students have to do for that to change.
Yeah, so I'm under the impression, and I can verify for sure, but I am under the impression that that appears when students actually click in to look at that submission
Okay.
feedback. So
Okay.
like if it is inline annotations, they would have to click on the inline annotations. Now they could click on it and click right out, but they could click
Yeah.
on it knowing that they at least clicked it and opened
Yes.
it up to understand that it's there. That is my impression, because if you just supply them the grade and you just give them kind of some text feedback in that overall feedback section,
Yeah.
there is nothing for them to click onto to go and do. So then therefore they're not really getting that next step of of
Cool,
the-
thank you. That helps me know what I need to tell them to do then, to say, yes, you may have read this, but you haven't done this
That's
part of
right.
it. So
Yes,
awesome,
right.
thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Right. Any other questions for the feedback, how it appears to students, how you leave it, anything like that that we've covered? Okay. Okay, so I do just want to quickly just talk about the quick eval for just a quick second, because it does go in line with leaving feedback and publishing feedback to students. Again, you do not have to use the quick eval to get to the spaces to grade assignments. You can go into your grade book, you can click on any one grade item and use the drop down and go to grade, and you'll be able to get to the exact same space. But the one thing that I just, because I mentioned it, that if you save your feedback for draft, if you just kind of work through the student's feedback and you just save it for draft, and then you move on to the next student and you do that. I just want to emphasize that in the quick eval, if you come to quick eval and you view by activities, then once you are done leaving all the feedback for students, you have everything done, you can just come here, go to whatever assignment it is, hover over it, go over here to more actions, and hit publish all. And when you do that, all of those drafts that you've saved along the way, it's going to publish all that feedback, the grades, etc., to students all at once. So this is a nice space to go to if you kind of just want to work through the grades, but not publish them for everybody one at a time as you kind of work through that, because we all know sometimes I can sit down and grade 4 of them today, but then I don't get to the rest of them until tomorrow. So the question is, do you want to see the 4 today, have their feedback, or do you just want to be able to say, here it is for everybody? So I'm only pointing that out on the quick eval. We will cover quick eval a little bit more when we do like the grades, etc. We'll talk a little bit more about functionality, other functionalities of the quick eval, but I just wanted to mention that as well, in case that's kind of your practice of grading and leaving feedback and you just want to save it to draft and then publish all at once. Okay, again, not the only way you can publish all. You can do that from a few different spaces too, but this sometimes might be the quickest way to just say you're done, go in and just publish all for a particular activity. Okay. Peggy, why would an instructor want to delay publishing? Wouldn't they want students to see it as early as possible if they had submitted early? Yeah, so I think that's probably an instructor preference. You know, I guess it would depend on the assessment. So in my case for math, like students have, you know, a week to finish their project. And some students will turn it in on Tuesday or Wednesday, while others wait until Sunday to turn it in. And so I guess my thought there was I wanted to be able to go in on Tuesday or Wednesday and start to early grade those and leave the feedback. But I guess I didn't want them to have all of the feedback on Wednesday when there was still students who have the assignment out there. So I guess it would just depend. That would probably, you know, that's a summative project that I give them. Whereas if it was maybe like a draft essay, then yeah, I probably would publish the feedback as soon as I grade it because it's just a drafted essay. And I would want them to have that quicker if they submitted it early versus other students who didn't. So I guess it would just be the type of assessment. And some instructor preference. That's, you know, sometimes everybody has their own rationale as to when they publish the material. But with that, going back to, you know, talking about timely feedback, sometimes that does come into play too. So depending on the assignment, again, if it's a drafted essay, you know, getting that back to them one at a time in a very timely manner because this is the pace they're working, it probably makes sense to publish individually as you do that. Whereas if it's a test or something like that, maybe you don't want to publish until everyone has submitted or the due date has passed. I hope that answered it. I just think there's a lot of preference there and different rationales. Okay. Right. Any other questions on anything? I can jump back to if there's questions on other things. Anything I didn't cover that you want me to jump into? Was this helpful? I hope so. I hope you spent an hour with me and it was helpful.
Stephanie, is there a way that we can block it so they can only do one attempt?
For quizzes or for submissions or for both?
Yeah, either.
Yes, there is. So those, the attempts or the number of times they can submit, those are going to be your settings that you set up for the particular quizzes or assignments. So
Okay.
you find those, like go to the actual assignment. So if I come in here to an assignment, you would go to the assignment, and you're going to be able to restrict that under submissions and completions. And you're going to be able to say they can submit only one. Okay, or they can, yeah. Or
Can we
all.
do that without going to each item? Can we do like all tests, only have one submission?
No, unfortunately.
Okay,
not. Yeah,
okay.
that
Thank
would
you.
be nice to be able to bulk edit that, but you can't. So you do have to go into each assignment or each quiz and adjust those.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Stephanie, along those same lines,
Yeah.
is there any way to change the default when you're making an assignment or a quiz? Because I always have to, for each one, have to remember to go in and
Mm.
change those settings.
Yeah, no, it defaults for, I think it defaults all or
Yeah.
unlimited, I think is what it defaults to.
Mhm.
For those, so you'd have to just be able to go in and say one, unfortunately.
I honestly feel like all of the defaults, almost without exception, are the opposite of what I want to do. So I have to remember to do them every time.
Yeah,
It'd be nice to be able to change that setting. Maybe that's a suggestion for later.
yeah, I can look in to see if we have the ability to configure those defaults differently. I will say that if we do have the ability to do that, it would be for everyone. So that might just have to be something that I like circle back to, faculty. and
Okay.
just in general to
Thanks.
do that, but I will look into it to see if we even have the ability to adjust those defaults for assignment and quiz settings.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Meredith.
The default question just reminded me, I was told, so Wednesday's son is in my class, and which has been very helpful. And she told me that he cannot see, like I can see when I'm scoring things, it sort of creates this like cumulative grade and I can see it, but I was told the students can't see it. So it was he had to do it for sports reporting, and it was very easy because it's not weighted, but like, and
You mean in grade, like they can't see their accumulative grade for the class?
yes.
Yeah, so that's probably most likely because in your grades, if you go to your settings
Okay.
and if you go to the calculation options, so most likely you are releasing the adjusted final grade and there is no adjusted final grade. So you want to make sure that the final grade released is actually the calculated final grade and that
Oh.
you're automatically releasing it to students.
Okay.
if you do that, if you change those settings, then it's going to look like what it did for the demo learner. And I'll show you the top of that. So that's going to show this
Okay.
of their grade. So it's going to show them their grade as of today, or however you have that set up, and then the letter grade or whatever the grade scheme is you have for the final calculated grade column before they get into all of their grade items.
Okay.
Is this
So
what
I
you
have to-
were referring to?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I have to, there must be a setting thing. I
Yeah.
thought I fixed it and he still can't see it, but you know, he can do
Oh,
math.
yeah, so that could also be the other place to look. Let me get out of the demo learner.
Okay.
The other place to look is in your grade book. If all of your students see how my eye next to that does not have a line through it, if your students have a line through it, that means that you are not releasing their final grade. And you can easily fix that by going to the grade column, hit enter grades. And then there's going to be this release, unrelease, check all your students and hit it. And then it's going to release their grade to them. That could also be the thing. If your settings are set up the way I showed you, but they're not, look for that eye with a line through it, it means the students, you in some capacity kind of hid it from them, probably not by choice. Like it probably happened in some setup of the grade book. But look for that, and we want to get that released.
Okay.
So we want the eye with no line.
Wednesday seemed to think that was a default, and I was like, why would the students not seeing their grades be the default? It was probably just a setting thing.
It is. So it was probably something that either I have found too, like if you are like the keeper of a template, and people are copying from your template, make sure your template settings are releasing the final calculated grade to do that sort of thing, because I have found that people have just copied from a template and the template didn't have the right setting. So now everybody else doesn't have the right setting. So those are other things to think about as we just prepare for spring. Be looking at those template courses too.
Okay, thank you.
I would just add, I had to do this last step that you just demonstrated, Stephanie. And when you hit the check all, it only did it on that page. And I had a student later in the alphabet, I had to go do it like page by page. So be careful with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, if your students do fall on multiple pages, then you're editing this page and then you have to like go to the next page. I know, not great, not ideal, but yes, that is a good point to make. Just reading through the comments. Feel free to ask other questions if needed.
And you can also double check what students can see if you're in the grade center and if you click their name, the drop down by their name and go preview, that you can see what students are supposed to see. So that's another way you can sort of double check that that final grade has been released. Or if you want to check the feedback, what it looks like, that's another way.
Yeah, good point, Scott. Meredith, to your point, it is like it is challenging as we learn the system, because there is lots of different ways and it's just different. So we're trying to figure out how it looks for students while figuring out what's the best practice for myself in my course and the content that I'm delivering, the assessments that I'm asking them to do. So you're trying to learn that as we learn the system too, but then you're also trying to help your students obtain the feedback and you're learning what they see. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges with just newness in general. But hopefully like just this quick overview at least gives you a better sense of like where your options are to leave feedback, where they are viewable to students, and then find what works best for however you want to give that feedback, and you can just hopefully better articulate to students where to find it. Any final questions? Okay, well, I'm gonna stop recording so that way but I will stay on if there's anybody that has any other questions. I'll feel free to do that, but I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.
So Stephanie, I do have a question that has nothing